Yeah, glad to have everybody here joining us. I'm really excited to share some of what I've learned about Notion over the last couple of years. We've been using Notion since around 2018 at Headway, but it only has been in the last couple of months that I've really dug in and taken a couple of online courses, watched some tutorials from folks like August Bradley and Kay He, Tiago Forte, and a bunch of different people in the Building a Second Brain community to really see how we can unlock the power of Notion and help us at Headway internally amongst our teams and externally with our clients as well. So I lead up the development team at Headway. I'm one of the co-founders, started Headway back in 2015. And I lead up our tools, technology, approach, documentation, and the way that we build a team to work for the client. So being able to surface our documentation and have our process really accessible, not only to our team, but accessible to our clients as well, so they know what to understand is really important to me, or rather they know what to expect when we show up to a meeting. I'm from De Pere, live here with my wife and 3 kiddos, and even though I'm a current member of Northeast Wisconsin, I grew up in Southwest Wisconsin in a tiny town of about 600 people. So 3 different cities had to come together to form even some semblance of a high school. So it was an interesting time growing up, but super happy here in Green Bay. If this is your first time joining us for a Headway event and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. That definitely helps us out a lot. And if you're joining us on Zoom, check out your favorite social media platform where Headway is always posting amazing things for you to check out. All right, so today, like I mentioned, Notion, there's this concept of networked thought. We want to show you how to operationalize that in your team, and we're going to go over a couple of different topics to help get you there. And then in the second half of the presentation, we're going to jump in, do some hands-on demo with Notion, and when there's time for question and answer at the end, I'm happy to stick around if people want to grab some of the templates that I'm sharing, try and work on them in your own space, and I can hop around, answer questions. If you're having any problems getting stuck, that's great, and you can ping me afterwards. Always happy to answer questions on Twitter or things like that too. So we'll cover what is Notion, why we use it at Headway. There's some shortcomings of Notion still. It's obviously about a 3-year-old software platform with a small team iterating quickly. So we'll talk about their speed to market and some of the new features that are coming out. We'll talk about what's possible to do in Notion. It's probably more than you think. Some lessons learned with us implementing Notion over the last couple of years, and especially with some of my deep dives in the last about 6 months. We'll talk a little bit about networked thought and how to help your team cover each other's blind spots and put things where they can help each other out instead of everybody having all their bookmarks somewhere or all your knowledge kind of scattered throughout different emails and wikis and notes and whatever. We can centralize it here, and that's one of the core tenets of the way that I approach Notion that I want to share with you today. We'll talk about how to help you manage your projects with that, and then that team knowledge vault is that networked thought piece that we'll show you how to build. We'll build that one from scratch. The project management piece, I've got a really nice template for you that really shows how we show up to projects with our clients, so we're excited to share that. So what is Notion and how does it compare to other tools? We'll talk again about how we use it at Headway and some of those shortcomings. Want to mention the integrations, that there is an official API coming later this year. It's in early alpha testing with some key users right now. Obviously, Notion uses their own API, but it's been private for so long. People have reverse engineered it and built these different integrations, and there's some really great things you can do with it already, including an amazing tool called Readwise that I'll show you how to get signed up for and use. It is a paid tool, but very worth it in my opinion. The web clipper that ships with Notion, or rather that their team built and that you can go download and add to your Chrome instance or whatever browser that you use. And then an alternative that I think is actually even better, and I'm excited to share that alternative web clipper with you. We'll talk a little bit about embeds and the way that you can bring some of your other work into Notion using Figma for design, Whimsical for some different charts and data diagrams. And then there's actually a whole ecosystem of Notion third-party tools. And there's a new charts library that I stumbled across preparing for this talk that I want to share with you as well. So what is Notion? Probably some of you have heard of it. Maybe some of you are using it. You may have seen that it's a task manager, or it's a wiki, or they have this thing called databases that they added a while back. Can you use it as a project management tool? Is it just a to-do list? Should I journal in it? Is it just for tracking workouts? Can I clip articles to read them later? Is it a learning management system? Yes, it can do all of that. It really depends on how you build Notion. It's a bunch of Legos, and unfortunately, it doesn't really come with amazing instructions like the Legos do with all the pictures. So you have to dig in and really understand what's capable. We'll talk about some of the lessons learned to hopefully shorten that journey for you a little bit. So like I mentioned, Notion can really replace most of those other tools if you take the time to set it up properly, but of course your mileage may vary. So things we've had it be able to replace in certain circumstances. Now we still use some of these tools as well, but used properly, it could replace Asana, Jira, Todoist, Things, OneNote, Evernote, Google Keep, Roam Research, Obsidian, which is kind of a competitor to Roam, Coda, Airtable. It can do all of the things that those tools do if you set it up right. So why did we choose Notion at Headway? We were looking for a better system than just the Google Docs that we had been writing in. We tried GitHub wikis. We tried even a thing called VimWiki. Most of us on the dev team at the time were using Vim as our editor, and a core chunk of us still do. And so when we were all unified in Vim, we thought, well, let's use this VimWiki tool, and we can synchronize it to a GitHub repo, and we can do push and pull every time we open it, and just got kind of messy. And we realized that as we wanted to roll out more standard operating procedures, documentation, project management tooling, we needed something that could be more accessible and centralized than just the VimWiki. And even the GitHub wiki, was a little bit hard to roll out to the rest of the team beyond development. And Google Docs was just a little bit too scattered. So we realized we wanted to share our knowledge and connect the insights in a way that would let us resurface that knowledge at key times. We needed more power than just those notes. We really wanted something that could link things together, not just hyperlinks, but actually relational links with databases. So if you haven't ever done any software development with databases and foreign keys and things, there'll be a couple new concepts here for you, but Notion makes it pretty easy and abstracts a lot of that away. You can just use the names of the things as they reference each other between the tables. You can get up to speed pretty quickly. We wanted an amazing keyboard-driven note-taking experience, at least I did, and a beautiful UI. And it had to be easily extensible and configurable. As I mentioned, Notion does have some shortcomings. If you check out Reddit or Twitter, YouTube, there's all kinds of people showcasing what really great things Notion can do, and then a lot of people kind of complaining about the speed, or it didn't have databases initially, so it was just this glorified wiki, and when could it replace Airtable, when could it replace their tool of choice? And Notion's been chipping away at a lot of these features, and I'll share the Notion release notes with you, which is written in Notion, of course, but they still have a couple of shortcomings. So we'll talk about that a little bit. One of the big ones is, and we still feel this pain a little bit, that there's no public API. It is officially coming later this year, and they're testing it. So I'm really excited to see what that means for people. Right now, if you want to use their private API, it's going to probably change. There's going to be some edge cases, and you have to do it in a somewhat insecure way where you have to go grab your token that is generated for you from your cookie and then give it to some of these tools that want to integrate, and it can be a little bit of security concern there. There's some ways around it where you can sign up for an account that you are comfortable sharing the token for, invite that account only to the tables that you want to allow access for, like forms to fill and that kind of thing. But it's probably best to just wait because it's so close now, and not monkey with any of that privacy concerns of sharing your Notion private token to someone trying to use their API, their private API. Now, another complaint is that there's no offline mode. This one's one that I've heard for quite a while, and I'm not exactly sure when this will be solved or if it's a concern for Notion themselves. It hasn't generally been a problem for me or for our team that I've heard of. Certainly people aren't on airplanes right now trying to do a bunch of Notion documentation, but that could be one scenario where that would be a bit of a problem. If you weren't connected to the Wi-Fi, you can't make some updates and have it synchronize when you connect back up. And then I was just curious, some of our clients use Jira and some of our clients use Confluence to document some of these things because they don't use Notion, or we share our Notion and they do some stuff in Confluence, and it gets a little bit of a hybrid. I was just curious if they support offline mode, and they kind of did do if you dig into the fine-grained details here, but the main headline is that they didn't design it for offline use either. Another criticism is that development, the Notion team themselves, is slow. And I'd have to agree. Until pretty recently, they're continuously saying on their release notes that they're hiring. We're hiring. All these features are great, but help us build them faster. They're somewhat of a Silicon Valley unicorn. There's a story where venture capital folks had tracked down their office and were literally banging on the door trying to get them to open so they could have a conversation. And the Notion guys were like, nope, we don't want to chat with you yet. We're just fine doing what we're doing. So they're keeping the team intentionally small, driving up that valuation, but they want to add a ton of value more quickly now, and they've started to hire and really solve that problem. So we'll see here what's new. So let me just check out, oops. This is their release notes, and you can see even just yesterday they had a really great release with a new feature called timeline view. So you can have your Gantt charts in your project, and anything that has a date will be able to display in this view. You can switch from calendar to this view and many others. They even have a feature where you can specify a different start and end date if you want the particular activity to span more than a single day. So this is the speed that they're operating at now. It had been slow, maybe a year ago, but for the last year, they've really been adding a ton of amazing stuff. You can hide database properties now, flexible subpage permissions. This is one thing we'll get into a little bit when I talk about the client template that we have at Headway, and a few workarounds I had to make because you don't have permissions at a database level to the granularity that you might want. So you can't have as many global databases as would be ideal, but we've got some workarounds for it, and I believe that that's coming. Also, sort of this endless scroll, the ability to do pagination is really great in case you've got a huge database and you want to be able to have that database be in the middle of a page and not take up the whole page. You can have it load just the first 10 rows or so, and your filter settings will let you surface those 10 most important rows as well. So we'll get to it in a minute here as well, the iPad and mobile stuff. So I'll just mention it while we're in here already. October 15th, they had a really, really great update for iPad that lets you use it much more like the desktop version if you have the Apple Pro keyboard, which has the mouse and keyboard attached right to your iPad. And it also supports the scribble capabilities. So yeah, here, mobile apps are bad, fair. Your mileage may vary depending on what you want to do. The mobile phone version, the handheld version, is more of just a content consumption device for me. I don't go into Notion too much on my mobile phone. Sometimes I'll check off a task or I'll add something to do later, but for the most part, it's kind of a reference. The iPad though, especially with the keyboard and these latest updates, is super powerful. It's like a mini laptop now with Notion, and it also supports Scribble if you want to go ahead and use your Apple Pencil. So another complaint is that shared editing isn't quite as smooth as Google Docs. That's true. It is a little bit slower. It isn't quite the same integrated, raw editing experience where that's the primary focus. It is much more focused around collaboration. But I think that the individual editing capabilities in Notion is better than in Google Docs, as long as what you aren't trying to do is just write a paper or like a statement of work or something. We still do that in Google Docs. And we do use the shared editing capabilities of Notion where you can see multiple people in the same document for our retros at Headway. This link here, and I'll share this presentation at the end of the session as well. This link, Retros at Headway, takes you to an Even Keeled episode. So I have a podcast where we talk to other members of the Headway development team and leaders in the community about development. And we share specifically our retro template in Notion and how we go about doing retros at Headway. So we do that with a lot of typing in Notion, and it works out really well. Some of the integrations that we'll cover, and I'll show you how these work when we get to the demo portion. Again, the API coming later this year, but we'll show Readwise and we'll show what that does. And it's its own separate system, and it integrates with more than just Notion, but it's super powerful, and it lets you highlight your Kindle books and sync those highlighted sections to Notion. So it's not taking the whole of the Kindle book itself, but if you highlight a section of it on your Kindle app on your iPad or on your actual Kindle device, then it will be able to sync that over to Notion inside of the book, and it just appends each new highlight into an area in Notion that we'll be able to show you here in a second, that really lets you resurface that content. And it's also saved with Readwise. So it's in Notion for you to review all in line and in context, but Readwise has each individual snippet. And you can even make little comments on the highlights that you make with Readwise from a Kindle book. And so when Readwise sends you an email every day or every week, whatever you pick, it uses a technique called spaced repetition to resurface that content that you said you cared about by highlighting it in an article or in a book or a tweet that you saved or a podcast clip that you saved, and it says, hey, this was important to you, you should remember it, and you can star it and say, oh, skip, or I don't want this anymore, that kind of thing. But just a really great way to remember the content that was important enough for you to highlight and store it in a central location while also resurfacing it through that integration with Readwise. And then I mentioned the Notion web clipper out of the box is fine, but this one called Notion Saver is much better. It has editable forms where you can increase the number of things you can fill as you're saving content. And then in addition to the content you're saving, you can also push highlights with the Notion Saver into Notion as well and append those highlights into the body of your note. It does embeds as well. So Figma, you can embed a full Figma design in there. The trick is it has to be public, which is a little bit of a bummer. I hope at some point they let you log into Figma and be able to showcase some private Figma links inside of a also private Notion instance. Whimsical, somewhat similar situation there. If you can embed those though. Google Forms, we use that to gather some feedback from clients on a, every other sprint basis. Once a month, we kind of check in with them and ask them to fill out the form, see how we're doing on a project. And you can embed other Google Docs, and they're sort of editable. It depends. I've had mixed results on this. Sometimes I can edit a spreadsheet, and then the next time I load it up, something changed and it isn't quite there. So I typically tend to avoid embedding other Google Docs, but the Google Forms are fillable and they work quite well. So what else can Notion do? We'll share this again. There's a big list of templates that I think, I've curated some of what the community has for you, but you can host a website on Notion using super.so. There's other free alternatives as well, and I link to both of those, but you can just have your content in Notion, push it out to a website, and it's right there for you. You don't have to worry about the design. You don't have to worry about a complicated editing workflow. Write it in Notion and push it out there. I personally track some purchases that I make at home. So for like user manuals, extended warranties, and receipts, I clip all of those, email receipts and things into Notion so that I can track all of that, so that when our lawnmower breaks or whatnot, I can call up the company and say, hey, here's all the details. I've got a picture of the serial number, everything I need right in Notion. Recently in those what's new in Notion release notes, they highlighted Headspace and how Headspace uses their product design team uses Notion to embed Figma and talk about the work that they're doing. So those design specs can be hosted right inside of Notion as well. All right, so before we jump into some demo stuff, a couple lessons learned to keep in mind. And if you have any questions as we're doing the demo, feel free to add those in the chat and I'll try to address them. But we didn't start using databases as databases. We really only used them as tables until about a year ago. And being able to have things in the same database and then labeling them as what they are so that stuff is unified and you can expose multiple filtered views instead of a single individual database is super powerful. So one example would be if you had positions that you were creating job posts for. Let's say we had design and development. We used to have a table called development positions, and we'd have developer, senior developer, tech lead, all those things, and we'd write out the descriptions and then we'd combine those and send them out to a job post. And we had a separate table for design positions, and we couldn't share or filter any of that content. We couldn't move, them along in any sort of editing approval workflow. Everything was just so segmented. And so unifying things into a single database is really powerful and lets you link between them. So that's one lesson learned. Another is that the database permissions aren't quite where we need them to be yet for a full external project management tool with clients. You can still do it. There's just a couple of gotchas, and we do it. So I'll show you with that template, but it'll be easier when they can make these permissions more granular so that we can, for example, have a global instance, a global database of tasks, and then only share a filtered view of those tasks with a client and lock it down so that they can't unfilter from themselves, so that we didn't want them to see other clients' tasks and that kind of thing. Oh, and if you can't find a database or a page when you're trying to link to it to create a relation, or if you're looking up a database, you'll see sometimes it only shows you 10 or 15. You can add some special symbols to the name temporarily, and that'll help you search for that particular thing that you're trying to link. Briefly about networked thought, there's a lot of interest in this area right now. There was an article on Medium where I first heard about the zettelkasten and what that means, and just how it's been starting to be implemented in things like Roam research. Notion is now playing a little bit of catch up with some of that networked thought capability and backlinks, but they're getting there, and it works really well enough for me that I don't need Roam anymore. So if you aren't familiar with Roam, don't worry about that. If you are, I think Notion, depending on how you use it, and you'll see how we use it here, is able to fully replace Roam for me. So kind of the evolution here, Wiki, this concept of a zettelkasten, Roam doing some of what they do, and then a guy named August Bradley has a really great course about pillars, pipelines, and vaults in Notion, and how you can use your knowledge vault as a global tag database to be able to share and surface that knowledge with your team. And that's what we'll get into at the end. A little bit more about the zettelkasten here if you're interested in looking that up and getting familiar with it. Very, very interesting read. And there's really great templates at this site called Notion Everything. So let me see if I can open this in a new tab here. So you can search for what you want, and there's all kinds of amazing templates in here. Some of them are paid, a lot of them are free, and some of them you have the option to pay if you want to or not. Some of them you can just look at and go, oh, that's a great idea. I wanna do it like that, and go build it yourself. August Bradley, who I mentioned, has a very extensive set of YouTube videos to learn how to build a life operating system in Notion. And I spent a couple of weeks going through each one of those videos and building it out meticulously, pausing the video and doing everything there. He now also has a course that you can take, and he gives you a template. So I'll briefly show that template. I can't share the template with you because it is paid, but I can show you what that looks like, so that if you are interested in checking that out and bringing it into your own personal space for your own knowledge management, not just that of your team, that's a really great way to use it. All right, so we're going to jump into the demo here. We'll do some basic Notion things, because I think there's stuff that people miss about how to navigate that is pretty cool and pretty important to get a good grasp on, so you can move quickly and feel empowered. And then we'll get into some of the templates and the way that we use Notion, and build out our own little knowledge management system here after that. So if you have any questions about what I'm doing, ask in the Q&A. Jacob will try and get those teed up for me, and we will go about building out some stuff. All right, so the secret is now out of the bag. Everything that I just showed so far was made in Notion. So this was a presentation that I was able to create inside of Notion itself. It's just a regular page, and we can embed images. You can put a separator in between, and that makes a new page. H2s will make a new vertical page. H1s will make a new next full horizontal page. So each one of these things was able to be surfaced inside of a tool called Wonder Presentation, and I will share the link to that, because I'll share this entire presentation and you'll have it. So kind of fun. I didn't know if it was possible. I just picked that up this week to see, hey, could I present this actually from Notion itself after I wrote the outline? And it turns out that you can. If I was handcrafting each one of these slides, they probably would have been a little bit less like a college PowerPoint with just all the bullets and an outline. But I just wanted to show that this was definitely possible and really cool. It doesn't support every single block. So you can see, for example, these toggles, which I use a ton of toggles when I use Notion, are not able to be rendered, but I'll share this entire presentation with you. So you'll have the outline, you'll have all the access to all of these different templates. And you can explore them yourselves. So, all right, getting into the demo here. The first thing to know about Notion's editing mode is it is a little bit like Vim almost, where there's this insert mode where you're typing and you can click around. And then if you hit escape, you go into kind of block mode. And in Vim, they call that normal mode. And so I'm just pressing up and down, and I'm highlighting a different block right now, and that lets me kind of navigate the document. And if I want to start typing again, let me just follow along this list here. So escape goes into normal mode. I can press enter to get to the end of the line. So when I press enter, it opens up in insert mode at the end of the line. Again, similar to Vim, if you type a capital A, that's what happens there. This is useful if you want to jump down and add another entry. So let's say after 7 here, I want to add a new 8. It'll auto number those. So I would just come down here, hit enter, and then hit enter again. And now I'm able to type my number 8. And if I hit escape, now I have a block selected, I can hit delete, and it will delete that. So you don't have to be in insert mode and press backspace forever, and it will delete that. So I just showed number 4 there. If you hit backspace, you can delete a block or a row in a database. Sometimes you have to hit escape a couple of times to get to that row in a database, and we'll show that when we get there. So if you hit escape and then you can hit the /, that will let you start typing to change the block. So if I hit /, I could say bullet, right? Because I can change this numbered list into a bulleted list. And I was able to do that in sort of block mode. I won't call it normal mode. I'll try and call it block mode. And you can see it, Notion renumbered the ordered list below my bullet. And if I hit Command Z, I'm on a Mac, it will undo. And so there's really deep undo history in Notion. There's really deep just page history in general. So you can go to this updates section. You can see all of the different updates that, that happened throughout the process of building this particular document. And you can restore versions as well, depending on how much you subscribe for. You can restore things either up to 30 days or beyond. Now you can also create a new block from an empty cursor. It says here, even with the prompt, type forward for commands. So / lets me start to create blocks. So let's say I want to do bullet here, and that's one way that I can get into a bullet. Now, if I say, oh shoot, I didn't want that anymore, I could type ASDF and then turn this back into something else. So I can do / turn, and I'll turn it into a number. And now it reorders everything again. So almost everything that you want to do as you're creating lists and notes, you can do from the keyboard. Here on number 8, if I wanted to turn the color blue, if I'm typing and then say, this would be great in blue, I can just type / blue, enter, and it colors the text blue. So you don't even have to get out of insert mode to change a lot of these things. Now, if I hit escape and I go to block mode and I type / I can also still type blue, and you can change it just the same. So really, wherever you are, Notion's got your back from a keyboard shortcut perspective. And it's really powerful. If you want to move a block to another page, the place I find myself doing this the most is as you create new instances of databases, which we'll see, it's kind of annoying where unless you duplicate an existing sort of customized database, you have to redo all the columns you want to hide, you have to redo all the widths of the columns and everything like that. So if you duplicate a filtered view of a database, then you can move it to another page, because sometimes you'll want different filtered databases showing up on different pages. So if you duplicate the one that you have, move it to another page and change the filter, it can save you a ton of time and not have to recreate every single one of the hidden columns or redrag all of the sizing around. So you can do that again, either in insert mode here by doing move, and you can just say move to, and then it'll bring up a list and we can see where we want to move it to. Or from block mode, we can type move as well. Or from block mode, you saw that pop up there, the Command Shift P. It tries to be helpful and tell you the keyboard shortcuts as you're learning the system. So Command Shift P would also bring up the where do I want to move this block to. /TOC is one of the things that you can do to create a table of contents, and it'll respect the markdown style of H1, H2, and all of those things. Again, I was able to just Command Z out of that instance and backspace a little bit here to get right back to where I want to be. So table of contents is really great if you're putting together some documentation and you want to be able to link to different sections and jump to different sections, just like you could in a Word doc or a Google Doc. It is markdown style editing. So if you do an asterisk and then a space, it's going to give you a bullet. If you do a dash and a space, it's going to give you a bullet, or a plus and a space, it's going to give you a bullet. If I do one period here and then space, it's going to jump into the numbered list, which is great. And if I delete it, it renumbers them for me. So in Markdown, it's sort of a hidden trick that not a lot of people know, but you don't actually have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you had those in a plain text Markdown document, you can actually just go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and the Markdown parser will do the numbering for you when it renders it. You don't have to worry about that with Notion because it kind of automatically does that renumbering for you. Pasting over highlighted text is kind of cool. Slack actually has this feature as well. So we'll get a link here. to Headway, and we'll select some text and we'll hit Command V. And now I just pasted over the highlighted text to make that a link. If I want to do that more explicitly, I can select part of the text with my mouse and then go over here and do link. And I can type in headway.io and it will link it as well. But sometimes it's easier to just grab the text, select it, and paste your link on top. One of the pretty new features in Notion is being able to create inline pages. And I don't know if Rome originated this or not, but it's where I first saw it, where you can create new pages by typing open square bracket, open square bracket. So if I do that twice, it's gonna prompt me for some things that I wanna do here. So I could link to a page, or I could create a new sub page in this page. There's some different options. And let me just think here. If I type Ruby, yeah, the Ruby curriculum. So I can link inline to the Ruby curriculum here. And previously, if you wanted to link to a particular page in Notion, it would always do that as its own block on its own line. So the ability to do this inline page linking is really great. And what it also does is it, I guess they released it around the same time. So this isn't really tied to this feature explicitly, but if I were to click this here, what it does is it has a set of backlinks on any given page. Well, this is a database, so it's actually not going to show it. But if I had linked to a page instead of a database, it'll show me the backlinks. So we'll see that when we build out our knowledge vault here in a little bit. So a couple of the things that I'll just mention, and then we'll see them when we jump into the templates, is that you can create some separation with toggles and background colors to nest some different content and only expose that content when you need it to keep your dashboards really nice and clean. So the Headway client portal is an example of that. There's the ability to do a full page, full width setting or not, which not a lot of people go in and you have to do this manually for every single page. And so I think it's a lot nicer to have it full width so that it's closer to your navigation bar here. But it's up to you on what you prefer there. I definitely recommend full width if you have a database in your page though, because the columns just get scrunched up and it gets hard to read things. A new feature they just rolled out literally yesterday is the ability to hide properties for columns. For example, if you're only using something for a calculation, you can hide that, and then the database entry will be more collapsed up at the top. One pro tip here for making your mobile application needs a little bit more streamlined. So August Bradley talks about this action zone where you can have all of your to-dos and things ready to add. And because on the mobile, it's a little bit harder to navigate around Notion and get to where you need to be, you can actually save the action zone from the web browser as a shortcut to your iOS home screen, and it'll launch right to the exact page that you want. So you can have as many of those shortcuts as you want on your home screen to go directly to basically a bookmark for Notion. And that'll open it up, and it's just as powerful to edit it right there on your phone as it is inside of the Notion's mobile app itself. There's a trick here to be able to render side-by-side content in a toggle, because by default in a toggle, you can't do that. So let me just see if I can show this here real quick. Oops. So I'll open this toggle up with Command Enter, and then I'll type Enter to get into it. And if I had thing 1 here and thing 2 here, I can't actually make them go next to each other inside of the toggle itself. It goes next to the toggle block entirely. So if you want to be able to have 2 things next to each other inside of a toggle, you can do that, but you have to kind of do a little trick. So we'll do a new page here first, and we'll say side by side, and then we'll go back. And I'll drag these 2 content blocks into this page. And now when I open this page, they're here. And now I'm in a full page. So now I'm not in a toggle anymore, and I can make thing 1 and thing 2 go next to each other. And if I go back, I'm navigating back with Command open bracket. I wish it jumped me back to exactly where I was, but you can go forward and back that way. Now I've got those thing one and thing two next to each other. And again, we're nested inside of this toggle. What I can do is I can say, turn into text, which is basically going to render the contents of that page inside of this toggle. And now they are side by side, which is kind of a little hack, sort of a fun trick. And you can see that you can actually position the side by side content by dragging it. So you can have it be as far away or close as you want. And if I want to, I can just delete the, whoops, just delete the heading of the page. I'm not sure why it's complaining about that there. But anyway, that is one way to do that trick. Another one that's undocumented except by the community is the ability to have global blocks in Notion. And where this could be really helpful is if you were creating a job post, for example. And so we could have some jobs, and we'll do developer and senior developer here. There might be other things that we want to document about these, and I kind of just default to having a database these days. Might not 100% be necessary for all use cases, but it works well to give you that additional power. So what I want to show here is that you can take a URL from a block in Notion, strip away sort of this middle context, and it's a little hard to see here, but you can see that there's this # 38F, and then here you can see there's 38F. And so this globally unique block ID here is able to be referenced at the top level of Notion. And when you do that, you can actually render the block's contents. So if I take, for example, this block here, which is a code snippet inside of a bulleted list, I can say copy link, and then I'll go into my job board. And one thing I might want to do is have like something like this. So I might want to manage these individual pieces of content, but be able to apply them across any given post. And so if I come in here and I paste that block that I copied from the prior page and I say link to page, it's just going to take me to that block in the presentation itself. So if I click here, it takes me into the presentation and I can scroll back to where I was. But if I run this sed command to strip that out or just manually strip it out, I actually used an Alfred workflow to do this. So I can grab this, copy this link, run my little command, which does, it pastes that link, pipes it to sed, runs that regular expression replacement around it, and then puts it back on my clipboard. Then I'm going to get this URL here. And if I take that URL and I bring it into one of these things and I paste it, you can see it's now just that top level canonical link, and I say link to page, it actually renders the content. So Notion doesn't really promote that as something that they talk about, but if I say nested page context hello, and I go back to the other page, nested page context hello is rendered right there. And if I say goodbye and I go back into this page, goodbye is right there. So it is shared across both of these instances. So I won't build this full thing out, but you could see where we might be able to have several blocks that we define in these toggles here, and then open up a given position, and we could paste, you know, the intro, and then we could paste, do have some specific content that's for this development role, and then we could paste the, it's not gonna let me do the same block twice, but paste the sort of where to apply links, because those might be global. And so that lets you kind of compose your content across multiple global blocks with individual nested custom content in between. The only caution here and I've thought about ways to make this be less scary, is that with great power comes great responsibility, where you might not know you're editing a global block, and you might want to just customize your developer role a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're actually editing the design position too, and you're talking about Git or something. So you have to be pretty intentional and pretty careful. My suggestion, and the way that I started doing this for us, is to put anything that's going to be a global block in a toggle like this above where you're going to implement those global blocks, and to keep those things contained into a single page so that you don't end up spreading global blocks across your system, because there's really honestly no way to know that it's a global block. It just renders the content the same as if it was the original version of the content. You can't even find out. It almost, they're the same, right? They kind of exist in two places at once. It's quantum blocks apparently. So that's a really powerful thing, but a little bit of a caution. And I think at some point Notion will come out with a way to do that in a more supported way. All right, so we went through some of the tips and tricks, talked a lot about keyboard navigation. I think it's super important that you spend some time digging into that. Notion has really great keyboard documentation about all of their shortcuts. In fact, let me just let me share that here briefly. So learn the shortcuts. This is Notion's help and support section, which has really great information about how to do different things, how to build databases. And I learn something new every time I come into this section of documentation. So it's really powerful. The one that I learned in the context of this presentation, which is really great, is the ability to kind of, via the keyboard, move content blocks around. So if I go into block mode, and now I hold down Command Shift and then move up or down, I can actually control where this content block lives, which is really neat. Because previously, what I would always do is I would cut it, and then I would get somewhere and I'd open a new thing, and then I'd paste it, and then I'd go up and then I'd delete. That's pretty bulky compared to being able to just kind of drag that around via the keyboard. And it even goes in and out to the different nested hierarchy. So really cool. All right, so we'll talk about our project management template next. We've got a whole section here on public templates, and we share this Moscow prioritization template with a lot of our prospects, with clients that want to work with us but are trying to figure out exactly what they need to build and in what phase. And so this is a template that you can grab, and Andrew Burbancourt, CEO of Headway, did a great blog post about the Moscow method, and that blog post links into this as well. And so you can do some Moscow prioritization if you're an entrepreneur and you want to think through the must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, and won't-haves for your feature. One of the core tenets of how we work with our clients at Headway. The retro doc that I mentioned is available here for you to clone and use. And if you want to learn more about how this doc came to be and the way that it's operationalized at Headway, check out that Even Keeled episode #2 with one of our former developers, Andrew Stuntz. He and I go in detail about the retro. And here's the thing that I built out for you all, which I'm pretty excited to share, is this client dashboard. And it has all of the supporting pages and databases embedded right within it. And so in our actual system, this sort of closing tag clients here is the upgraded version of our clients. I'm not going to take you into there, but I created a whole new replicated version of this the exact same way that we use it, but it has the databases a little bit more tightly knit into this template so that it's easily shareable with you. And what we do is we've got, again, these supporting actors over here, a global client task database up top in a Kanban view, and then our active client list over here. And so let me just delete this one because that's a generated out version. These two are just for aesthetics. So we might have already a couple of clients in the list, right? And now if we want to create a new client, this is called a template button. And you can configure this by adding any blocks that you want to duplicate when you press the button that you name. And so when I click create new client, it generates those blocks for me. And it pops open that new client template. So we could call this Startup Wisconsin. We could upload a new image here, a new logo. We could upload a cover if we want to. And then there's a couple of instructions here. It asks to filter the task database for this project and ensure that you filter every view. There's a couple of different views. So we would want to filter this based on the project, but in order to do that, I have to show you the project section first. So we'll bounce over to there in just a second. And then we want to filter this calendar for the project as well, because right now, they're very global. It's literally every task in the system. There's only one task in the template, but or in the system right now, but that's not being filtered. What we do, because of the limitation with Notion's databases, is we have sort of an external bucket for tasks that are just for internal things like, sync up with the development team that's been allocated to this client project, spin up the GitHub repo, things the client, doesn't not need to know about, but also doesn't need to care about, just internal coordination and things that we want to make sure get done ahead of like at the project kickoff, or if there's more nuanced things that we want to remember about a project that don't need to be client facing, we can put those at this layer of the dashboard. And we don't share this layer with our clients. And then what we do share is this new client template dashboard, and this would be whatever the client is called. So we'll call it Jacob. Hey, Jacob.
Hey. So I actually have a question. Bob actually kind of brought up a good point. He's like, Notion, he said Notion looks powerful, but it seems like you have to spend a lot of time to get it exactly how you want. How do you feel about the idea of the amount of time it takes to get set up and the value that creates? I mean, I guess candidly, if you want to speak to what it's been like for you.
Yeah, it is a lot of work to understand its power. It's those Legos, it's those building blocks, and it's a tool in the era of no code, right? No code tooling is kind of all the rage right now. There's tools like Bubble that allow you to build desktop, web, and mobile applications without writing a ton of code, just kind of configuration and different features that you can turn on. But Notion's the one I've dug into the furthest, and the thing that I like about it is that while we're kind of recreating the wheel in certain sense for things like Asana or things like GitHub issues or whatever, maybe it'll kind of all come around for you at the end when we talk about the way that everything is able to be interconnected at a much deeper level than just the hyperlink. Because right now, if you're going to do everything in Asana, that's great, but you better have everything in there. Otherwise, it's going to be a link out to an external system, and now you're in multiple places. And I think the potential power of Notion is that you could literally do everything all inside of the system. You can write your morning reflection that links to your project, that has your tasks in it, that has your client share out deck, that has your embedded YouTube video for the person who is on PTO that they can get caught up on, and then they can link that to the design embedded Figma version that you can have a discussion on, and everything is just all able to be centralized in one place. And the level of fidelity of the content in a given Notion page is just next level. It's so much better than the description box in Jira, than the notes box or the description box in Asana, those kinds of things. There's a little bit of work to do to make it so that you don't drop something that's assigned to you. I think that's the biggest pain point right now with Notion. But with the API, I think we're going to be able to get there, to be able to have more ways to have data flow not only into Notion, which people have kind of reverse engineered right now, but also to be able to surface that data from Notion in a different dashboard or in a different way that allows you to have that kind of overarching view of everything that's on your plate, or be notified of it from some other external system.
Yeah, and in my experience too, like I just feel like once everything is set up, being able to like using the quick find, like the search tool, it's so nice to just find, like instead of digging into things, folders, like drop downs, you can just like quickly, and the search has gotten so fast. Like it used to be a little clunky. It's it's so fast. It's like instant, and you can find things that are within bodies of copy, like certain terms that you're looking. Oh, what was that thing we talked about? This. What was the name of that document? You can just like find it. It's just crazy how good it is. So yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So I'll get into a little bit of that networked thought and that exposing of information at your fingertips right when you need it. Normally, we would have some sort of list of tasks to do. Maybe there would be a folder of design specs. Maybe there would be some discussion in Slack. And we still have Slack, but we can do so much all in this one centralized location now that it's pretty powerful. And it's all in front of and with the client so that they're exposed to all those same expectations and understandings. And so what we do is we come in and we set the mission and vision right away. We make sure that everybody's on the same page and that the client has stated this, that we know what we're driving forward towards. And then we showcase the team and the tools that we use. So this is, again, one of those powerful ways that I talked about using toggles. And so what we have here is an external database that I linked into this toggle, and it's our product team. And I locked it by opening up the database here and choosing lock database from the more settings. Just that way, people aren't going to monkey with the filters accidentally or whatnot. Like, this is how I want the content to be presented. It can be unlocked really easily, but it's just kind of a hat tip that says, hey, you should probably have a reason for unlocking this. So what we do is we bring our stakeholder in here, the product lead. If there's a technical project manager, they would be in here. The design lead's going to be in here, tech lead. The whole team gets built out, right? Customer success, which is oftentimes the role I play on a project. And what we do is we change, again, because we can't embed a global database of like Headway crew and filter it down to this project just yet, because there's just kind of permissions issues and information leak issues if we do it that way. We have to come up with creative ways to have local, private, and secure databases exposed to just the teams that need them. And so what we did is, this is a local database. And when you open up an instance of it, it actually links to a shared database called product team roles. And this is global. This product team roles is global. And it allows us to say, stakeholder name here is Jacob, and we can put some of his information in here. We can choose, him because he'll need to be invited to Notion itself. And then what we have here is a one record filtered view of the product team's role database, and it's filtered down where it matches stakeholder. And so if I unlock this for a second and choose filter, you can see this is where the role, which is just the name of that first column in the database, contains the text string stakeholder. It's case sensitive. And when we filter that down, Jacob can come in here and he can say, oh, cool, I'm really excited to work with Headway. My name is on here. This is interesting. What is this? Oh, product team roles. Interesting. This is me. And I click it. And what does it do? It exposes a global shared database of roles that come to fruition on our projects. And we trim, these aren't the exact words, but this is in a shareable context for you all that you can customize to your needs, where we talk about what outcome do we expect for this role, what is the role itself, and what activities might you do. And sometimes, actually, the stakeholder is the only one where we have a separate list, but we have sort of a yet another deeper layer of sprint activities that get filtered down based on your particular role. And so this is another embedded database. And if we click filter, you can see here where responsible contains all, because the stakeholder is one, it is included in all. And so this lets us have the documentation of what it means to be a product lead, and we can put Robert Ryan, which are two of our product people, in here, and then they can pull this up and they can say, oh, cool, I know what it means to be a product lead on this particular project, and we can customize this in a way that makes sense for that particular project. So here's the list of activities, and if they say, I need to do customer journey mapping, we have this documented internally for us, but I didn't want to be too presumptuous for what you all would do here. So you can click this SOP, standard operating procedure template, and it will generate sort of a placeholder for you to fill out what outcomes do you want to happen for the customer journey mapping step. And that is something that the product lead will be responsible for. And the client can see all of this. Everybody on the team can see all of this. We've gotten really good feedback that, this helps folks on the team understand what they need to do when they come into a project at Headway. What are their roles? What are their responsibilities? Perhaps this is their first time being a tech lead on a project, but they're a very senior developer. They just haven't had to do one of these tasks, production environment setup, or, the launch week activities, maybe in their role as a senior developer on the last project, the tech lead on that prepared the release notes. And so they hadn't done that before. Maybe they contributed some content to it, but hadn't done everything in that process. And so what does it mean to prepare release notes at Headway? Well, you can come here and look at this documentation. And oh, by the way, you're in your client dashboard. You're not in a separate wiki. You're not in a separate place that you had to go find or search. It's surfaced for you right where you need it. And so that helps set the expectations for everybody on the team of what they need to do. And then another filtered view of those same sprint activities where it's set to core. And so there's a lot of sprint activities that happen, but aren't necessarily, they would be a big list to show here. So this is for a client who maybe hasn't worked with us before, hasn't done Agile before, and doesn't know what a daily stand-up is going to look like, doesn't know what it means to do user story mapping at Headway, or what they're going to find in a backlog refinement meeting. The sprint demo or the sprint demo prep, the client isn't involved in the sprint demo prep, but we can show them that we do this. We can show them that the team gets together and prepares for the demo in a way that can be making sure there's no bugs, making sure that we've got all the features planned out in the user story map properly. And it just helps us understand what we're going to do when we show up to do client work, and surface that documentation right here in the context of every project in a way where it can be maintained. So if the daily stand-up thing needs to change, oops, I'm hitting delete instead of space. We can change it here, we change the documentation, and then on another project, it's going to be edited for everybody, because this isn't a one-off database instance, it's a shared filtered view in a given unique project. So the next thing is this action items. You saw that at the top of our shared template, we had a global action items list. That's for things that are shared across all of our client projects and things that are more internal facing. This is the client facing action items, and this is a local private database to this page. And so what you need to do is you need to invite the specific person to this page, your client or whoever, your team as well. And then they'll be able to add and see these action items. And the way that these come to fruition is through the meeting notes. And so if we come into our meeting notes template, you can see, oh, action items follows us. That's great. I don't mean it actually follows us. I embedded it here as well. It intentionally follows us because I built it that way. But what we do is if we want to have a new meeting note, we create a new instance, open it up, and now we've got a couple of templates here that we can choose. So we'll just choose the meeting template. And inside of the meeting template, we have the action items again. And the notes were, hey, this was a great meeting, but I need to remember to send the status report. So how many times have you been in a system where you're taking notes on a meeting and you take some action items and now, great, you have to go copy those out somewhere else. Sometimes they get forgotten. They aren't assigned to anybody. So nobody knows that it actually is something that they need to have happen. This fixes that problem because it embeds a filtered view of that local action items database for this project in a way where now I know that I have to send the status report. It's not done. The status is new. And if I keep the status of new, it'll show up across each one of these meetings. So it's a little bit of a hack, but if I remove new now, that kind of like is kind of like send, right? Like, so if I remove new, then this filtered instance, which the status is new, will be empty. I can create a new one and we'll be good. So that way we can create new ones from that list. And if I close out of that demo meeting, back on my meeting notes, I've got send status report. It's assigned to me, created here, created at, and it's not done yet. So I could change the status to ready maybe, or maybe I am doing this, so I'll press doing. And if I go back up one layer higher, to the client dashboard itself, send status report is there as well. So now it came from the place where we were taking action and having notes in our meeting to the top of the meeting notes to the middle of the client dashboard. And it surfaces all those to-dos across this project in that way. What we then do is we tell folks, everybody at Headway has a individual personal dashboard, and that's where their one-on-one notes go. That's where their quarterly reviews go. They can generate their own quarterly review templates, that kind of thing. We also have that global task list that's across all of the projects embedded for them because that's easy to do. But whoever generates this new project would need to go in and access those people's individual dashboards, and they can't do that. They don't have those permissions. So as folks get new Notion dashboards, they can embed their projects action item dashboards on their personal dashboard. So they can have the global ones, and then the Jacob project, and then the Bird's Eye project, and they can surface all of those action items from their individual projects as well as the global ones on their personal dashboard to get that holistic sense of what's all assigned to them. Anytime you get assigned a thing, it also goes into the updates in Notion, and then there's a little bell icon as well that gives you a notification that something happened. So you can also have an email generated if you get tagged or assigned something. So there are ways to get notified of that. So there's another filtered view of this meeting notes where it's this Gantt chart view. And if I bring this up here, these are some of the things that we have happen in the first portion of one of our projects to kick it off. So I can hide that and show this, or I can show a different view. And until yesterday, the view that we had was this one, because only yesterday did they release that Gantt chart view, but it definitely fits the bill here. And I think it works really well for the kickoff items to be able to showcase what is happening when and get that client up to speed on what's going on. So for stand-ups, you saw inside of the meeting notes, there was this section of stand-ups. I have a note here that says this is only for viewing the stand-up entries. If you want to add a new stand-up, you should do so not in the general meeting notes, but actually in the stand-ups page. So if I click here, or if I click here, it takes me to the same spot, and it's a dedicated stand-up page. And this is where we get a new concept that I like a lot in Notion, which is kind of like a template, a database template new button, so to speak. So we've got the canonical stand-up database here, the original one. It's an inline database. It's right here. I could open it up as a full database page if I want to, but I don't have to. I can render it right here. And you can see I have a heading above the stand-ups that's called all. And now anytime I've got this arrow, that's a linked database. And the way that you do that is you create linked database in the slash command. And so I would need to pick from that database. And you can see we've got a couple of them. This is where that tip of adding some characters. So if I do like plus and greater than, and now I want to oops. So a lot easier to filter for that one now instead of that whole big list. And so I can embed a new instance of this stand-ups database. Here's that problem I talked about where now I get all these columns again and they're out of order and they're too big. And so now I've got to do all this work. I'll just delete this here. What you would want to do if you want to get another instance of this particular view is once you've generated a view and customized it, that's when you can duplicate it. And now you can move it to a different page. So that you can see the duplicated instance is exactly the same order, it's the same width and all of that. So that's a tip there where if you do it once and set it up the way that you like, then you can duplicate it and send it off to the other places where you need it. The reason that we have a second instance of the stand-ups database here is because it's filtered. So this one is not filtered at all. That's why it has all. It is sorted with start date descending, so the newest one will be on top. This one though is filtered where start date is today, end date is a week from now, the name contains sprint X, and attendees contain me. Now me is dynamic in Notion. I could pick and attendees contains Jacob, and attendees contains Jordan, and attendees contains me, but the me one is dynamic. And so whoever is the person that clicks new row will get added as an attendee here at a minimum, and then they can choose some additional attendees. So the thing that's cool about creating a filtered instance and adding a new row to it is that in order for that row to show up, all of these filters have to be true. So what Notion does is it populates them for you. Otherwise, this row wouldn't show up. So the attendee was me dynamically. The end date is a week from today. The start date is today. And the name is Sprint X. So if I want to customize this, all I have to do is come in here and customize it. Now, it no longer matches the filter criteria of Sprint X, right? So it drops out of the sort of creation table and into the display table. And now I can work with it. So if I want a 5-day template, I can, a 10-day template. I had to pick either 5 or 10 days as the default in the creation database. So we'll pick a 5-day template here. But this allows us to have our team come in and add their stand-up updates in a table in text-based format ahead of the stand-up call. That way, they've already thought through what they did yesterday, what they plan to do today, any blockers or questions that they're going to have for the team. And not only does that help the stand-up go more smoothly and people speak more in a more refined way about what they did and what they were planning to do today, but it documents it for the client, it documents it for any team members that are on PTO, and it's just a really easy way to make sure that the whole team is on the same page. So this is just a template. You'd have to come in and type your things in here. But what we recently changed to is this week view, 5 or 10 days, depending on if the sprint's a 1 week or a 2 week sprint. For smaller projects, sometimes we do 1 week sprints if it's only like a 4 week engagement. And what this does, instead of having a daily stand-up template, it's a weekly or a sprintly stand-up template so that you can see the arc of somebody's work across the whole of the stand-up. And if you see like, hey, Jacob's really stuck on, this Facebook ad issue where we keep getting our account rejected or something, maybe that's something as the technical PM I would come in and help address, or we'd want to set better expectations with the client around the messaging that we can use to launch this particular campaign, that kind of thing. So it helps surface some of those things you wouldn't see in a daily stand-up scenario. And again, our action items are right here. So if in the context of the stand-up we say, oh yeah, make sure to send me that pull request, or make sure to invite our client to that whimsical flow, you can assign that to people right here in the context of your meeting. You're not out of band. It's all just right where you need it, and it'll work great. So if we go back to the dashboard view again and look at the meeting notes, we've got that same viewable instance of the stand-ups. Just in case you forgot that it was a stand-up instead of a regular meeting, I thought it would be good to embed that here as well. Similar story with releases. We've got templates for that. We do risk and assumptions for the project and make sure that there's several meetings that actually flesh that out in a couple of multiple hour sessions. And so we can document all of that here. Our design team does really great UX audits of existing work or kind of design inspiration and what we might want to have for a mood board. That all can live here. And then the data model can embed a whimsical. So this is an actually embedded instance of a whimsical project here. And it doesn't let you edit it right in line, but it does let you display it. So just a couple more things on the client template here, and then we'll get to building our knowledge vault. We find it really helpful to have some shared documentation for our clients. And so this is a bit pared down from what we actually have in our library, but we do quite a bit of mobile development, and there are lots of different gotchas on the Apple ecosystem and in-app purchasing and Apple's 30% and family sharing and restoring purchases and App Store subscriptions versus offers and all these different things. And so we've gone and gotten quite a bit of documentation around these edge cases, and we document those globally, and then we embed this client resources database into each one of our projects. And so we can filter this view based on whether the platform for this particular project needs web, mobile, CMS, or any, and then our team has this info at their fingertips and the clients can see it as well. If we say, oh yeah, remember that, you need to go do this thing for Fastlane, or you need to get your DUNS number registered before we can submit the app on the App Store. So we can point them to documentation there. The product glossary is unique to each individual project. And so if there's some jargon about a particular medical app that we're building that we need to document, or there's just some business process things in logistics or shipping that are new to some of our team members, we can make sure that the product glossary is up to date and we're using the same shared vernacular with our clients. We embed the status reports here in a way where the team doesn't have to see them. You can just invite the client to one of these generated pages, and then if you don't have permissions for something in Notion, it doesn't show up for you. So whoever you invite to this status report document is who would see it listed in this toggle. Otherwise, the toggle will just be empty. And that embedded Google form that I mentioned, I don't have the exact form here. It wouldn't make sense for me to create a generic one for y'all to use either, but you can use the /embed command to embed one of those here. And if you paste the URL, embed typically is an option that pops up for you as well. You can just hide any content you want in a toggle and tuck it away for another time. So we've got a process at Headway called Expedition that's the front half of some of our builds that we then go in and actually do development on. And so if there was a bunch of Expedition content that we had customer interviews and we had, you know, different client stakeholder meetings and share outs and videos and things, we can tuck that away if it's not relevant, or we can link to it but not clutter up the build section of the dashboard and just tuck things away like that. Some of our teams, after they get in and get this dashboard, will rearrange it, and that's totally fine because, for example, after the first sprint, maybe the client's seen this sprint activities documentation, maybe they know who they're working with, and really getting to these meeting notes is the most important thing. So they can rearrange those to be more towards the top and make this malleable and work for them. And that's one nice thing about this template being generated for each client project. It gets you started and you can make it your own and make it what you need it to be. Okay, so here is a new instance of Notion, just a demo account. I created the client dashboard in the Headway public templates section and made it public. And so I was able to go to that URL and duplicate that into my own dashboard. So now that shows up here. The next thing that I want to talk about is Readwise. Readwise is a really powerful tool that lets you do daily reviews. You can add highlights from all your books, from different articles with Pocket and Instapaper, podcasts with Air, and it can export to Notion. So what you do is you sign up for a Readwise account and you add a couple highlights. Sometimes you have to add them manually. It's a little bit of a process to get signed up. There's a free trial to make sure that it's going to work for you. And then you click this Notion export button and it will export it based on some settings to your system. And when it comes in like this. It's called Readwise and it has the serif font and it has some instructions, and then it has an inline database. And we don't necessarily need all of this stuff to stay this way, but it doesn't hurt to keep it just how they have it. The one thing that is a little bit tricky and caught me off guard is when you first integrate with Readwise and it generates this database for you, the categories that it generates are articles, books, tweets, and podcasts, I believe. I like to have my library, which I actually call my media vault based on August Bradley's Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults system. I like to have my media vault store more than that. So some quotes that I find, some different videos, emails that are important to me that I wanted to remember, and courses. And so he's got a whole video that I'll link to about how to get set up with the media vault. But for the purpose of this, without changing anything, I can show you how it works. And so what you want to do is grab this Notion web clipper, but not the one that they use. You want to use the Notion Saver version. So again, I'll link to that. You install it in Chrome. And then when you're on a particular page that you want to save, let's say this interesting article about virtual influencers making money, which are just bots, while humans can't go do anything. Interesting article. So I'll click this Notion Saver, and you have to set up a form for where you want the content to go to. So I already set up a form for my library, and if I click, you can have as many of these as you want, and as many as you have databases that you want to save content into. So if I go into that particular form, it will pre-populate the title based on some information. It'll let me choose the category from the Readwise database. And then there's a couple extra fields that I customized and added that don't come out of the box. So the knowledge vault and the projects. And these are relations, and the default web clipper from Notion can't even do this. And so this is the main reason why I recommend Notion Saver over the default Notion web clipper. And so if I wanted to save this content, I probably want to save it to a particular knowledge vault entry. The knowledge vault can become your global tag database. Some people call it a master tag database. And it's not a DevOps article and it's not on Ruby on Rails. So we'll call it COVID. And you can see that if I don't have that, I can create that new instance in my knowledge vault right from the extension, which is just pretty cool. And then I could type in the author if I want. And if it relates to one of the projects that I'm working on, like perhaps this mobile application project that I have set up in the default template, then I can save it, and it'll be a reference both to the Knowledge Vault of COVID, and it'll have a back reference to this mobile application. And when I click Save to Notion, it tells me that it worked. I like to not open it in the desktop app and just open it in the web app just to verify that it's doing what I think it's going to do. And so you can see here inside of Readwise library, this article that I clipped has the full title. I didn't fill out the author, but the URL that it came from in case I want to go back to it. These last highlighted and last synced properties don't get filled out by the Notion web clipper or by Notion Saver. They do by Readwise Kindle highlights. And so if you highlight a book in Kindle, it'll expose that metadata there. The category that we chose was articles. That we don't have a number of highlights again, because that's not applicable to this particular type of capture. And then the knowledge vault that we picked and the project that we picked. And the cool thing is this knowledge vault just got created. And so I can go into this knowledge vault. It has a link to the library item that I just saved. And I actually have a template in here as well that I recreated from watching the video of August Bradley's knowledge vault system that lets you, again, reference the information for your COVID knowledge vault right where you need it. So any article that I clip that I tag as COVID would expose right in here. I can make some quick notes about this, and then I can distill my best thinking on this particular knowledge topic as I collect information about it and learn more and learn more. And you can share this with your team. And so the way that this might work is for you personally, you can collect some knowledge on different topics of interest, but for your team, maybe there's a Phoenix Ecto migrations cheat sheet that you're going to need in the context of this mobile application. So we'll save that. We'll save this in Elixir Knowledge Vault, which I just created. The author we'll call Dev Hints, and the project again is that mobile application, and we'll save to Notion. Go to my Readwise instance. So you can see that pops in right here. It's an article again. The knowledge vault we just created is called Elixir, the original article and the project. And so I could pop this open and I could review this content. It does a pretty good job of grabbing the, why am I blanking? The programming text, the monospace text out of articles and putting those into a code block, which is really helpful for reviewing that stuff later. And now the power of being able to reference this library in another spot is going to make sense. And so if we go into our new client template and we say this new client is in fact that mobile application, right? So we'll go in here and we'll say, we'll create a new instance of our knowledge vault. And we'll add a filter. Actually, one second, let me open up the knowledge vault itself. Yeah, I didn't do this yet. So we need to create an instance of the project to the knowledge vault. You might not do this all the time, but it's flexible enough that you can try things out and see if it works for you. So we'll create a new column. We'll call this projects, and then we'll choose the relation. So we'll choose this project DB template, which is one of those pages and databases that comes along for the client dashboard template. So we'll create a relation to that. And then inside of that database, there's this mobile application project. And we'll choose two of these articles here that are associated with that particular project. So if I go back to the project, now you can see the project for mobile application pops in here, and I can filter this where the project contains mobile application. And so now anything that's relevant to this team as they're collecting content as they're just exploring newsletters and learning things in general, if they tag something in the knowledge vault that it belongs to this particular project, they can share that information with their colleagues right here in the context of the project, and really help create some powerful linking of that knowledge across multiple team members. So it's not that, you know, Jacob found something, this Elixir cheat sheet, and then printed it out and has it right above his keyboard, and, you know, I found it and I bookmarked it and I have it on my iPad or something. We all know that it's right here and it's available, and I guess however we want to consume the content is fine, but the point is that I might not have told him that I found it and have it on my iPad, and he might not have told me that he printed it out. So anybody on the team can contribute to this shared knowledge vault that will surface itself for either one of your core technologies or one of your business processes, one of the things that you need to learn to be a subject matter expert for your client project, or just some technical know-how to level up your skill on the team. So we've got all these templates here for you that we'll share. They'll let you build with some pre-built Lego models. You can tear them apart, you can clone it, you can duplicate it, you can break it, and you'll always be able to get back to that original shared template. So feel free to explore, experiment, and hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. If anybody has anything now that they want to cover, I'm happy to poke around in Notion with you.
Andrew's very impressed.
The cool thing about Notion and no-code tools like this is that it's a bit finicky to get it set up and configured, but you don't necessarily have to know how it was built to use it, if that makes sense, right? So if somebody on your team is able to program and they build you a whole system, you don't have to know how they built that system to consume it, to use it, right? You don't know how Asana was built necessarily. You don't need to know how the Headway client dashboard is built, or at least not everybody on your team does. If you want to change it and customize it, of course, you'll need to get into the inner workings, but that's the beauty. You can change it, you can customize it, and you still don't have to program. You just have to learn how to change the different preferences and embed things and filter things, and it's pretty accessible, because I've seen a lot of people do pretty crazy things with Microsoft Excel, and nothing in Notion is that hard. You can do a lot of the same formulas. They've got a really good formula helper. We didn't even touch on formulas here today, but there's tons of great templates out there that have good example formulas. There's amazing YouTube content. Again, August Bradley, Kehi, Tiago Forte, lots of different folks. We'll link to those. It'll be in the presentation, and it is one of those things where you have to digest it. You have to pause, go back, rewind, try it yourself, and go, wait, you never showed me that data. Where'd that database come from? Where did this go? And it's easy to kind of gloss over things that you need to know if you're building this from scratch, which is why I wanted to make sure that we shared that template, because that'll have everything in there for you. You can explore it, decompose it, and if you have any questions, definitely ping me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Yeah, we'll definitely be sending out the email within the next couple of days with this recording and with all the notes and stuff. So yeah, everybody have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. See y'all.